Hi, class, and welcome to The Anxiety of Indianness. This is written by Meenakshi Mukherjee. Now, Meenakshi Mukherjee was obviously an Indian writer, and she's also a Sahitya Academy winner. One of her most famous works is a book called An Indian for All Seasons. And this is actually a biography of the historian R.C. Dutt, and it was published by the Penguin publishers, all right. And she received the Sahitya Academy Award in the year 2003, and this was for her book The Perishable Empire, Essays on Indian Writing in English. She is a teacher, she is a critical theorist, all right, and she's also a visiting professor in various foreign universities also. And what else? I'm having some network trouble. Okay, yes. So, Meenakshi Mukherjee, she died in the year 2009, and she is one of the well-known thinkers and theorists of Indian literature. All right. So, the last essay that we discussed was P.P. Ravindran's The Genealogies of Indian Literature, right? And there we traced the genealogy of Indian literature, of how, Indian literature as a body, as a theoretical body of works came to be. Now, in this particular essay, we're going to talk, look, it's titled The Anxiety of Indianness. Okay, again, that idea of what it means to be Indian, it is something that we have been discussing throughout this particular module. Even your first essay, is there an Indian way of thinking, was a question in this regard, right? It was, what does it mean to be Indian, or who can be defined as an Indian, is something that is a recurrent question that's coming up. Even in P.P. Ravindran's work, we saw that, the umbrella term of Indian literature fails to show the diversity that exists within India. All right. So continuing in that line is the next essay that we are talking about. The Anxiety of Indianness are novels in English, and this is written by Meenakshi Mukherjee. I have actually picked out this copy from JSTOR, and this is an article that she had written in the year 1993. All right. The Anxiety of Indianness are novels in English by Meenakshi Mukherjee. No one would write a doctoral thesis on the Indianness of a Marathi novel. But when it comes to English fiction originating in our country, not only does the issue of Indianness become a favorite essentializing obsession in academic writings and the book review circuit, the writers themselves do not seem to be unaffected by it. The complicating factor being that English is not just any language, it was the language of our colonial rulers and continues even now to be the language of power and privilege. All right. So she begins by this small blurb sort of thing at the top of the essay. All right. She begins by saying that no one is going to write a doctoral dissertation. That means no one is going to do a research on the Indianness of a Marathi novel. Marathi is a regional language, right? So no one is going to question the Indianness of that particular novel because it is written in an Indian language. And by extension, it must be talking about the Indian experience. But when an English fiction, that means a writing in Indian English, comes up, all right, it questions it automatically. Everyone starts questioning the issue of Indianness within that work. All right, and it becomes also sort of an obsession in academic writing, and everyone starts doing a research on it, and there are book reviews and questions and everything going on there. The writers does not seem to be unaffected by it. Even the writer themselves are not unaffected by it. They, the complicating factor there is that the Indianness of a Marathi novel is not questioned because it is written in a Indian language, that is Marathi. But when an Indian English novel is written, it is questioned because it is using the language of the colonizer. All right. Even after independence, we are using the language of the colonizer. I am speaking to you in that language right now. And this language automatically is synonymous with the words power and privilege. All right. The language English is synonymous with the words power and privilege. Someone who is adept at using English is someone who has power and someone who has some sort of privilege. And that is what is questioned, not the language at which it is written. The fact that you are choosing to use the language of the colonizer, you are choosing to use your powerful and privileged position within society to write. That is what's questioned, is what we can understand. She begins the essay by talking about how in the year 1938, a young Indian writer who was living in France wrote an experimental novel in English. All right, so there was a young Indian writer who was living in France and he wrote an experimental novel in English, okay, which carried a second forward of 3 paragraphs. All right, so this work, he wrote a novel. He was in Indo. Now look at the multiplicity coming there. He is an Indian writer. He's living in France, and he wrote the novel in English. Already, 3 or more languages are in play. All right, and he wrote a forward to that work, and it was of 3 paragraphs. All right, the forward seems to have been an early diagnosis of the theoretical issues involved in this bicultural act. All right, so it was 1938 is very, very long ago. It was before this idea of biculturalism and hegemony of languages and all was discussed. So he wrote a forward, and in that forward, the issue of this bicultural act. Why bicultural? There is more than one culture involved, right? So the theoretical issues of that act were discussed in that particular forward. If we can scrape off the patina of obviousness that has gathered over the statement in the last half century, it may be possible to examine the relevance of its implication today at a time when English novels written by Indians have suddenly gained more visibility than ever before in the brief span of our relationship with the English language. All right. So if we try to scrape off the patina means, a sort of a covering, a layering. Okay. Even if we obviously, it's very obvious to see that this novel is a bicultural event. But even if we scrape that off, adu maichu kalanjal polum, all right, the it is possible for us to examine the relevance of its implications. So that even if we try to remove the obviousness of the fact that this novel is obviously a bicultural product, we cannot do away with the implication of such a work. That is the implication of being bicultural, of not following one culture alone. Will this work be considered as one of Indian literature, or will the French accept it, or will the English accept it? There are a lot of problems there, right? So we have a very, very brief span of a relationship with the English language, right? She calls it brief because in the long history of Indian literature, the writer in English is the latest arrival. Some might even say that an interloper, but certainly someone who has taken off his shoes and made himself at home. So she's comparing, she's saying that the Indian writer in English is a very, very recent arrival. Very brief and because the Indian writing in English did not begin very long ago. Okay, it is a recent phenomena. And although it is a recent phenomena, she's comparing it with a person who is, suppose a guest comes to your house, and even though that person has just come in, they make themselves very comfortable by removing their shoes and, probably putting their legs on the table and sitting there very, very comfortably. Why? Because they feel that they own the place. They will behave that way. So this is the same thing that is happening with Indian English writers. All right, but the metaphor may not be quite appropriate because the writer in English need not take his shoes off to be comfortable. He keeps them on because he is, at least potentially, one of those whom the Time magazine calls the new makers of world fiction, whose raw material may be in India, but the target readership of his work spans countries and continents, keeping him ever ready to undertake journeys, either real or figurative. Taking off your shoes will not do when you have to travel these days. Okay, look at very, very interesting use of language. So she first compares the Indian English writer with a guest who's come to your house and has removed his shoes and sitting on the table, right? But she says the Indian English writer does not even need to do that. That means they do not need to be comfortable in this space that is India. All right, they are a new introduction, or they are a new guest who has come to the space of Indian writing, but they don't even need to be comfortable. He's not going to remove his shoes metaphorically. Okay, why? Because he does not need to be comfortable here. ഇവിടെ അല്ല അവരുടെ roots ഉള്ളത്. Okay, why? Because these are the people about whom Time magazine, which is an international magazine, will call them the new remakers of world fiction. All right, whose raw material may be in India. That means their story, the raw material for their stories or novels or non-fiction, whatever it may be, it is coming from India. But where is the target? The target is not in India. The target is the world.